I was sitting in the doctor's waiting room in our valley town near Los Angeles when my phone rang. It was my only daughter. Her voice was sharp and distant as she said goodbye. "We're leaving tomorrow. I already sold your beach house." I replied. "But you forgot something." She thought I was joking and let out a smug laugh. I burst into laughter, because the house she sold was actually... My name is Donna Harris. I'm 68 years old, and until that call, I thought I understood my daughter. I became a widow 6 months ago. My husband died from a sudden stroke during our early backyard gathering, right as he handed me my morning coffee. He kissed my cheek and said, "Morning, darling." Those were his last words. Since then, my daughter had been around more handling arrangements, driving me to appointments, even pushing me to get this checkup. "You need to stay healthy now that you're alone," she'd say with a smile I once trusted. But now, everything was clear. It had all been for her convenience. The beach house near the studios had been our family escape for years. We bought it when she was a teenager, pouring in every bit of savings from my husband's software engineering job. Summers there meant family barbecues, glimpsing celebrities from nearby lots, building irreplaceable memories. She brought dates, then her husband and I cooked and cleaned like always. I never imagined she'd sell it off without a second thought. And the truck my husband polished it every weekend in our valley driveway. Its seats still held his familiar scent. When she hung up, I sat quietly among the waiting patients, feeling a strange calm wash over me. The doctor called me in, said I was healthy for my age, just eat better and rest. But my mind was on the envelope my husband left me a few days before he passed. Something told me that whatever was inside held the key to turning everything around. Tell me, which city are you watching from? Leave a comment below so we can connect. I'd love to know how far my story can reach. Back home that evening, I headed straight to the bedroom drawer in our valley house. My hands shook as I pulled out the manila envelope Charles had given me 3 days before his stroke. He had said to open it only if I felt ready after he was gone. With everything after the funeral, the grief, the paperwork, I had pushed it aside. But now, after that call, it came rushing back. I sat on the edge of the bed we shared for decades, the room filled with shadows from the hill views outside. I tore it open carefully. Inside were legal papers, bank statements, and a handwritten letter from Charles. His steady script brought tears to my eyes. "My dear Donna," it began, "if you're reading this, I'm not there anymore. I kept this secret to shield you from stress. All those years as a software engineer, I invested our savings wisely in properties and tech stocks. We have more than the beach house. You're secure, my love, in ways you never knew." The documents laid it all out. There were deeds to several homes in different LA neighborhoods, a condo downtown with views of the studios, a small motel in the valley outskirts, and yes, the apartment building where Lindsay and Jacob lived, right near those celebrity sighting spots. Charles had owned it silently for 12 years, through a company I never heard of, and now I was the sole heir. Bank certificates showed accounts with balances that stunned me, millions of dollars from those tech stocks he multiplied quietly. He explained in the letter why he hid it. Our daughter Donna, if she knew our true worth, it might change how she sees us. I wanted her love based on who we are, not what we own. The irony hit hard. Lindsay had dumped me thinking I had nothing when really everything was mine. That night, sleep evaded me. I paced the house, touching the old furniture Lindsay always mocked as outdated, staring at photos from our backyard gatherings where she played as a kid. Early the next day, I dialed Mr. Pierce, the lawyer who handled Charles's will. He had offered help at the funeral, and now I took him up on it. "Mrs. Harris, how can I assist?" I told him about the envelope and asked to meet urgently. His office was in a modest building near the studios with windows overlooking the valley traffic. When I showed him the papers, his eyes widened. "This is substantial." Charles was shrewd. "You're the owner of all this, legally airtight." We discussed options. The beach house sale was invalid since Lindsay had no authority. "We can void it quietly," he said, "and for the building administrative tweaks will give you full control." I insisted on secrecy. No one, especially Lindsay, could know yet. He agreed, outlining a few weeks' process. As I left walking through the bustling streets with people rushing to auditions or sightings, I felt empowered for the first time since Charles left. Over the following days, Mr. Pierce updated me on progress. He nullified the house sale, the buyers got refunded without fuss. The truck came back too after proving the power of attorney Lindsay tricked me into signing during my grief was deceptive. I had been so vulnerable then, signing without reading. Now I studied the documents myself, learning about stocks and deeds I never imagined handling. Charles had turned our modest life into this fortune, all while we lived simply in our valley home. I kept up appearances, chatting with neighbors about Lindsay's trips, smiling through their pity. But inside, determination grew. Lindsay thought she left me destitute. Soon she'd learn the cost of that assumption. 3 weeks later, my neighbor Jody rushed over with the latest gossip. She had heard from her brother-in-law at the bank that Jacob was in hot water over loans he took using their apartment as collateral, but it turned out the place wasn't even his. I nodded knowingly while sipping tea in the kitchen. Jody added that Lindsay was heading back alone to sort the mess, and apparently Jacob had lied about the whole Europe venture just to dodge his debts. That evening, Lindsay showed up at my valley home door looking pale and worn, dragging a single suitcase. She collapsed into a chair and spilled it all. Jacob had ditched her in Paris for a younger woman from the hotel staff. There was no business deal. It was all a ruse to blow the money from the house and truck sales on his escape plan. She had trusted him completely, only to wake up to an empty room and disconnected phone. The debts he left were overwhelming, over $100,000 from loans she never knew about. The next day, she headed to their apartment near the studios. When she got there, the doorman handed her an eviction notice. It demanded she vacate in 30 days from a company called Harris Ventures, Inc. She stared at the paper, confused by the name, thinking it must be some mix-up or scam. She called the number listed, but the voice on the line confirmed it was legit. The building owner had decided not to renew her lease due to unpaid rents and legal issues. Panicking, she realized the banks were circling too, claiming joint responsibility since they were married. Lindsay came back to me that afternoon, eyes red from crying. She explained the eviction and begged to stay for a bit, just until she found her footing. "I have nowhere else, Mom. Jacob took everything." I agreed calmly, showing her to her old room upstairs with the hill views. But I watched her closely without a word, noting how she unpacked with trembling hands her expensive clothes, now wrinkled and useless. She wasted no time looking for work. With her credit ruined and legal claims pending, options were slim. 2 interviews rejected her outright over the background checks, but the third offered a part-time gig cleaning offices at night near the Hollywood studios. It paid minimum wage, but it was something. She started that week, coming home exhausted after shifts, her feet sore from scrubbing floors where celebrities might have walked during the day. One morning, over coffee, she shared bits from the job. The other women on the crew were kind, sharing tips on efficient mopping and dealing with tough stains. She mentioned how humbling it was wiping down desks in buildings buzzing with star sightings by day while she worked in the dark. I listened without commenting, seeing the first cracks in her old arrogance. She even admitted the money from the sales had vanished fast in Europe, leaving her scraping by. As days passed, Lindsay juggled calls from creditors, prioritizing the ones threatening foreclosure on what little she thought she had. She didn't know yet that the apartment building was mine, or that the eviction was no accident. I kept my routine morning walks in the valley, chatting with Jody about neighborhood news while she adapted to this new reality. Her determination grew, but so did the weight of her choices. Over the following days, Lindsay dove deeper into her cleaning shifts. She came home each morning with stories from the crew, especially Mrs. Pina, a 50-something woman who had raised 3 kids alone after her husband skipped town. Lindsay described how Mrs. Pina shared tricks for handling stubborn carpet stains and balancing family demands with night work. "She's been at this for 15 years, Lindsay said one afternoon while folding laundry in the living room. "Told me about scraping by on tips from office tenants, even spotting a few celebrities leaving late meetings. It makes you appreciate every break." Mrs. Pina's tales hit close. She talked about fighting for child support through California courts, dealing with eviction threats when rents spiked near the studios. Lindsay listened intently, admitting it opened her eyes to how fragile things could get without a safety net. She started applying those lessons, budgeting her small paychecks for groceries and bus fares around the valley. The exhaustion showed in her slumped shoulders, but she pushed through, saying it built character she never knew she needed. One weekend, while sorting through Jacob's leftover boxes in her room, Lindsay found a small envelope tucked in a jacket pocket. It had my name on it in Charles's handwriting, different from the one I opened earlier. "Mom, look at this," she called, bringing it downstairs. We sat at the kitchen table and she handed it over. Inside was a short note and a key. The letter read, "Donna, if this reaches you after the main envelope, our daughter might need guidance. This key opens safety deposit box 319 at the Central Bank branch downtown. Use what's there wisely. Love, always, Charles." Lindsay's face lit up with hope. Dad had a box, I had no idea. We drove to the bank the next day, her nerves buzzing during the ride through valley traffic. The clerk verified my ID and led us to the vault. The box held jewelry, rings, necklaces, bracelets. Some heirlooms from Charles's side, others I didn't recognize. A list inside estimated their value at $200,000. Lindsay gasped, tracing an emerald pendant. "This could change everything, Mom." We brought them home and spread them on the table. Lindsay researched values online, calling appraisers in LA jewelry districts. She decided to sell most, keeping only a simple brooch that belonged to her grandmother. "I need to prioritize the debts with real collateral," she explained, echoing advice from a free clinic advisor at the bank. Those loans threatened seizures if unpaid under California's strict creditor rules. Over the next week, she visited stores in the bustling jewelry markets, negotiating prices and walking away with cash. She paid off the urgent ones first, those tied to the apartment, and old credit lines Jacob had forged in her name. The relief was palpable as she updated me on cleared balances, but the process wore her down, reducing family pieces to transactions. I observed quietly from the sidelines, noting how she now planned meals frugally and skipped luxuries. Her conversation shifted from complaints to reflections on past mistakes. Jody stopped by one evening and I shared glimpses of Lindsay's changes without revealing my hand. She nodded approvingly, saying it seemed like real growth. Lindsay even volunteered to help with yard work around our home, trimming bushes, with hill views in the background. But I held back the full truth, watching her navigate this hardship step by step. One evening, after her shift, Lindsay came in quietly and sat at the kitchen table. Tears streamed down her face as she detailed how Jacob had forged her signature on several loans without her knowing. She had given him access to their joint accounts years ago, never imagining he'd use it to rack up debts in her name. The banks held her accountable since they were married, and now collectors called daily. She broke down, saying the betrayal cut deeper than the money. Jacob had planned his escape all along, using the sales cash to fund it. She recounted finding emails on his old laptop showing he'd been scouting women online for months, setting up the Paris scheme, while pretending their trip was a fresh start. The messages revealed conversations about residency papers and quick divorces, all while he assured her of their future together. The phone rang the next morning. It was Mr. Pierce with updates. He confirmed Jacob's location in Paris, where authorities had detained him for attempting a sham marriage to gain residency. The young woman involved needed papers, and he needed a hideout from his creditors. More importantly, evidence showed he deliberately misled Lindsay, including falsified documents that could prove coercion. This might clear her from full liability, but the process demanded court filings and expert witnesses, costs running into thousands she didn't have. I asked for details on timelines, and he estimated a few months for resolutions under international cooperation laws, possibly involving extradition if charges stuck. He mentioned gathering affidavits from her to strengthen the case, but warned it wasn't guaranteed. I thanked him and hung up, letting the information sink in while staring out at the valley hills. That afternoon, Jody came over for our usual chat in the backyard. The warm breeze carried sounds from distant studios as I filled her in on Lindsay's tearful account and Mr. Pierce's confirmation about Jacob's arrest. Jody leaned back in her chair, processing it all. She pointed out how Lindsay's story revealed a web of deceit that started long before the Europe plan. It's not just the money, Donna, it's the total disregard for family ties. We weighed the options for the upcoming revelation, discussing how to lay out the facts clearly without emotional detours. Jody supported a decisive stance, reminding me of times I'd overlooked red flags in the past, like Lindsay's growing distance after marriage. Tough love isn't easy, but it's necessary here. She's had her wake-up calls. Now she faces the outcome. Her words reinforced my leaning toward closure. As we talked, I felt a shift inside. Lindsay's actions had eroded any chance for mending. The pattern of self-interest, from selling my things to ignoring warnings about Jacob, showed no real change despite her current struggles. I decided then to proceed with the full disclosure, ending our connection for good. No more safety net or emotional support she'd navigate alone. That evening, I organized the papers in my study, double-checking deeds and statements to ensure nothing was missed. The resolve hardened as I pictured her reaction, knowing it was time to close this chapter permanently. Sleep came fitfully, but with a sense of finality I hadn't felt before, as if Charles's foresight had prepared me for this exact moment. The following Friday, we arrived at Mr. Pierce's office downtown LA. Lindsay fidgeted in her seat, dressed in her best remaining outfit that hung loose from weight loss. She thought this was about help with her legal tangles, but I had arranged it differently. Mr. Pierce greeted us professionally and slid a thick folder across the desk. "Miss Stewart, please review these," he said. Lindsay opened it, her confusion growing as she scanned the pages: property deeds, bank records, investment certificates. I took a steady breath and began explaining. "Your father left more than you ever knew, Lindsay. Those investments he made quietly over the years built a fortune: homes across LA neighborhoods, a downtown condo, a valley motel, and the apartment building where you lived near the studios." Her eyes widened at the figures: millions from tech stocks Charles had nurtured. I continued detailing how the beach house sale was invalid since she had no right, and how I had already reclaimed it along with the truck through legal channels. The eviction notice wasn't a mistake. That building has always been mine through his company, and the decision not to renew came from me. Lindsay's face drained of color, shifting from shock to disbelief. She stammered questions about how long I'd known, why I hadn't stepped in sooner, during her nights of tears and days of scraping by. "Mom, you watched me struggle, crying every night, working that humiliating job when you could have fixed it all with one word." I nodded firmly. "Yes, because you needed to face what your choices cost. Selling my things without asking, abandoning me right after your father's death for Jacob's empty promises. It wasn't just about money. It was trust, shattered beyond repair." She begged for understanding, dropping to her knees in the office, promising profound change, swearing she'd dedicate her life to making it right. "Please forgive me. You're all I have left. I'll do anything." But I refused, my voice even and resolute. "Actions like yours are irreversible, Lindsay. You treated me as disposable, a mere obstacle to your gains, and now you learn that bridges burn for good." Mr. Pierce interjected gently, confirming the document's legitimacy and my absolute control over the assets. He outlined her next steps, filing for Chapter 7 bankruptcy to discharge unsecured debts, but losing any non-exempt assets under California law, including potential liens on personal items. The process would take months, involving mandatory credit counseling sessions and court appearances, where she'd have to disclose every financial detail. Her credit would be wrecked for 7 to 10 years, limiting jobs and housing options. As for the divorce, without Jacob's cooperation from his detention abroad, it dragged on painfully. California's community property rules meant splitting marital assets equally in theory, but with his fraud tainting everything and her name entangled in forged loans, she walked away with nothing substantial, perhaps a small settlement if she proved innocence through costly litigation, but facing alimony battles and asset forfeitures alone. She left the office in tears, heading back to a cheap rented room in the valley town, isolated from former friends who distanced themselves amid the scandal and whispers of her downfall. I returned home peacefully, sharing the day's events with Jody over tea in the backyard as the sun set over the hills. She offered steady support, helping me adjust to this new quiet life without the constant weight of family obligations or unspoken resentments. Reflecting on it all in the days that followed, the lesson stood clear. Greed's consequences ripple far, eroding bonds that once seemed unbreakable and leaving isolation in their wake. True value lies in loyalty and respect, not in what you can take from those who raised you. A hard truth. Lindsay now lived every day a cautionary path for anyone tempted by shortcuts at others' expense.